This was a heck of a way to start the new year, January 17th. It was Martin Luther King federal holiday weekend. This was a Sunday. And to tell you, for about 12 months, it's perplexed me why the pilot was flying on the Sunday. For like so many times, it takes someone a year later to fill me in and give me the rest of the story. This was a migratory bird program mission. It's called the Midwinter Waterfowl Survey, conducted along the Oregon and Washington coast from the Oregon-California border all the way north to the Canadian border, and includes the area around Seattle and Portland and up the Columbia River. It's the exact same mission that is involved in the last accident that I showed you the picture just a moment ago. In this particular case, the aircraft was totally destroyed. We suffered 2 fatals. And for those of you that are interested in looking it up, the NTSB identification is on the bottom, WPR10GA113. To date, they only have the preliminary report posted to the web. I checked this morning. Go ahead and go to the next page. On this Martin Luther King holiday, the pilot he lives in Corvallis, Oregon. That's the end point of the track on the right side. Now I'm going to try something I haven't done before. I'm going to see if I can play with the highlighter. I've just highlighted Corvallis. I don't know if you can see that. It's a little learning exercise for me as well. This is the home base, Corvallis, where the pilot based out of. There were 2 hangars, 2 airplanes, 1 pilot. He started, and Corvallis, if you don't know, is about, as far as the state of Oregon, midway north and south, but on the coastal area of it. And he had previously done the inspections, the surveys to the south. He couldn't fly on Saturday because of bad weather. There was a weather window on Sunday, the day of this flight and this accident. The window was from about midday, 12:30 or thereabouts, 10 to 12 o'clock until about 5. 5 o'clock in the evening, a big weather front was supposed to be moving in with winds of 50 to 60 miles an hour, low ceilings, freezing levels were fairly low, big winter storm. And his intent was to take off and fly north up to the Olympia, Washington area, just south of Seattle, and survey a couple of refuges and come back down the coast. This particular picture shows the track of the airplane. He took off. The aircraft was not equipped with AFF. He flew north along Interstate 5, past Portland, doing various surveys, and up to Olympia, where he got some gas. He flew out to the coast from Olympia, which is not shown on this map, but there's a survey that he did along the coast from Olympia. And then as he came back, he was filed to return straight to Corvallis. But he had to deviate and ended up over at Newport. Newport is over here on the coast, where the radar track begins, right there. He got gas. He talked to the FAA. He closed 1 flight plan. He filed a flight plan from Newport over to Corvallis, estimating his arrival at 1,700 hours. Unfortunately, he never opened his flight plan for reasons that only he knows. When he had the FAA on the phone to file the flight plan, he declined to get weather information. There were air mats out for icing and turbulence and, icing and turbulence. He took off at 16:03. Right before takeoff, both he and the observer, who was a contractor, called their significant others to let them know that they were taking off. The contractor told his girlfriend that the weather was, in his terms, horrendous, really bad. The pilot told his girlfriend that if he didn't show up by 1700 and call her, that she should call the FAA and let them know that he hadn't arrived. And that was, as far as she was concerned, an unusual request. But it wasn't so unusual because the program evaluation for that region had documented that a couple of years before, that flight following was not very standard there. They took off and followed the little green dots as it winds through the valley along Highway 20, and you can see where it terminates. Let's go to the next page. The next page shows the last few not AFF hits, but radar hits. There was no AFF. It shows a fairly constant altitude over the low ground, and then at a point it shows the aircraft turning on a course directly towards Corvallis and descending, and it descends down until it meets the terrain. I put down on the bottom of the picture some dots that show Highway 20 as the low ground. For some reason, the pilot chose to cease flying the absolute lowest ground over the highway and turn direct and fly towards the airport, which was 9 miles away. The weather was quite bad. Ceilings and visibility were very marginal. This picture right here is taken, go ahead. We're trying to resolve an audio issue. Sounds like we're good. This picture that you should be seeing now is from the cockpit of a private airplane. The pilot had actually taken a video as he was approaching Corvallis, not over the mountains, but in the valley. And this was about an hour and a half prior to the accident. So it kind of gives you the impression that the saturation level, mist, the low ceilings and visibility was predominant. He'd made a statement to the NTSB that when he looked over towards the hills to the west, where the mishap aircraft was coming from, they were obscured and you couldn't see anything. So it just gives you an idea of what it looked like. Next slide. You're sitting in the cockpit of a Cessna 185 flying on the same track as a mishap aircraft at about the same altitude. Corvallis would have been in the 12 o'clock position, and like so many times, if he had managed to miss this ridge line and continued to descend, he probably would have hit the next one. He technically didn't hit the west face. The impact occurred just past the crest of the ridge. You'll see pictures of that in just a second. There's two theories, and as a matter of fact, we'll probably never know for sure whether he saw daylight and a sucker hole and decided to fly through it, and a downdraft pushed him into the trees, or whether he was following his Garmin 296 GPS unit and local terrain that he knew by heart, and was trying to scud run. I can't tell you that. What I can tell you is on the next slide is that when he hit the Douglas fir, it disintegrated the aircraft. This is the cockpit. You see both of the seats, the pilot's seat in the foreground and the passenger seat, the observer seat just above that. That's the instrument panel and the nose of the aircraft. Next slide shows the aft cabin. There was nobody sitting in that, but it was completely disintegrated. Next slide shows the left outboard wing. What that shows, and I'm not trying to make you investigators, is that great big curved dent here, and I'll circle it, was the first impact of the aircraft with the trees. And if you imagine your hand or your arm extended as the wing, it hit the tree in a level fuselage attitude. It wasn't nose down, nose up, bank left, bank right. It was straight and level as best I can tell from this. So he wasn't trying to turn away from something that he saw. Next slide shows the tail section stuck up in the tree about 65 feet. And the next photograph shows the right wing, which was the biggest piece of the fuselage. And that, subject to your discussions, covers most of the facts. I wanted to throw in, because I'd asked you to pull out the 5 steps to a safe flight and 12 standard watchouts, a couple of other pieces of information. I said that I didn't quite understand why he chose to fly on a Sunday, but what I learned was that there had been 2 pilots to cover this region's mission, and the other pilot was medically grounded. She had to transfer her workload over to this pilot. And these surveys must be done on the same track at the same time of year every year in order to get a good count of the waterfowl that they're looking for. It also happens to be a bad time of year for weather in that region. So this pilot was doing his normal workload plus someone else's. That might explain why he was flying and felt compelled to fly when he had a weather window. Another common thread that we'll talk about throughout each one of these accidents was their IAT training. I would ask, but you could raise your hands and I wouldn't know who's responding. How many of you have recently checked your own IAT? You're in an IAT course right now. But if you're a manager, have you checked the IAT records for the people whom you're responsible for their supervision? In this case, and in almost every other case that I've investigated recently, people are not complete with the minimum requirements of OPM 4, and that's a DOI requirement for DOI employees. That would cover all the aircrew members, supervisors, and managers, or for pilots, OPM 22. This was one of the cases where they had not completed that. I'll ask one question, then I'll turn the mic over to John. Jamie, could you ask anybody in the audience if, in me telling this story, they can identify an unnecessary risk or a situation where it showed a tolerance for higher risk?
You were able to hear that?
Not at all. Yeah, I agree. One of many. The organization, and again, we showed James Reason's slide there of organizational factors and local supervision and the person that makes the unsafe act. The unsafe act was he did not establish flight following. He used his cell phone to call his girlfriend, but he could have opened his flight plan before he took off. He filed a flight plan, didn't open it. So when this guy crashes at 16:22, and it gets dark pretty quick and the weather's coming in, who's going to look for him? Great observation. The girlfriend, by the way, she did not call the FAA until the number that he gave her until after 1800. So she waited an extra hour. The first time that the FAA documents that they received that information is 1822. By that time it's already dark and the winds have already hit. So it certainly complicates the search if we don't know where you're at. The organization didn't equip the aircraft with AFF or radios that at lower altitudes would work in those hills. So there's a lot of areas in which we can address.